On one hand, the United States is putting in all its efforts to somehow stop China's growing power and isolate it globally. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, major European superpowers like Germany and France are drifting away from the U.S. and getting closer to China. On April 7, 2023, President Emmanuel Macron made an official visit to China, and after meeting with the Chinese president, he made statements that shook the entire West. In an interview, the French president said that Europe should remain completely neutral on the Taiwan issue between the U.S. and China, and should not support either side, whether it's the U.S. or China. Just 5 days later, during a tour of the Netherlands, President Macron gave another interview to journalists, which caused quite a stir in the U.S. He said that the time has come for Europe to develop its own independent policy, and that it no longer needs to blindly follow the U.S. or heed its advice, whether it's regarding the Russia-Ukraine war or the China-Taiwan issue. After these statements, the American media and think tanks reacted strongly, criticizing the president heavily. The New York Times even published an article portraying France as having stabbed the U.S. in the back. But this isn't just about France. Germany has also recently taken steps that clearly show it is now seeking to get closer to China rather than the U.S. Last week, the New York Times published another article detailing how German companies are now signing deals with China, deals that were once made with the U.S. So, is Europe now getting closer to America's biggest rival, China? Is the 100-year-old friendship between Europe and the U.S. coming to an end? And if so, why? Why has Europe been compelled to take this step? Let's find out the answers to all these questions in this video. If we talk about the differences between Europe and the U.S., the first major signs began to appear when Russia attacked Ukraine. NATO was divided on the Russia-Ukraine issue. On one side were the U.S., Canada, Ukraine, and Poland, who wanted the entire West to attack Russia and crush it. On the other side were France, Germany, Italy, and Spain, who wanted no military confrontation with Russia. Their priority remains to stay neutral in this war. On October 2022, when President Biden threatened Russia that if it used tactical nuclear weapons against Ukraine, the entire West would launch a nuclear strike on Russia, which could potentially destroy the entire world. Just 6 days after this statement, on October 13, 2022, the French president tweeted that France does not want to be a part of any world war, and therefore, even if Russia launches a nuclear strike on Ukraine, France will not launch a nuclear strike on Russia and will prioritize its own interests. This was a huge statement, making it clear that Europe's superpowers and the U.S. are no longer on the same page. This may be bitter for American policymakers, but the harsh truth is that the French president is openly saying what many European countries want to say, but can't due to fear of the U.S. Despite the immense pressure, France has now stood up to the U.S., and gradually other European countries are also beginning to openly support France. This raises the question, why is Europe gradually turning against the U.S.? The reality is that the Russia-Ukraine war has severely impacted Europe, and it is now experiencing the most severe energy crisis in its history. According to Bloomberg, European countries have already lost $1 trillion in just 1 year, and there is no end in sight to this war until 2026. If this war continues for another 2 to 3 years, Europe could be completely devastated. On April 15, 2023, Germany also shut down its last 3 nuclear reactors, which means that the energy crisis is about to worsen. But what is the connection between the Russia-Ukraine war and Europe's energy crisis? After the sanctions, Germany's economy has literally collapsed. Germany's entire economic model was dependent on cheap Russian gas. Germany's economy is powered by 2 industries, the chemical industry and the auto manufacturing industry. Both of these industries run on the same gas that used to come from Russia. When the Russia-Ukraine war began, Russia initially raised its gas prices due to Ukraine's support, and finally shut down all gas pipelines except Nord Stream. Then, in September 2022, this pipeline was also blown up in an explosion, completely cutting off Russian gas supplies to Europe. According to Russian intelligence, the U.S. played a major role in blowing up this gas pipeline. Anyway, to compensate for the losses caused by this energy crisis, European businessmen are now entering the world's largest market. BASF, the world's largest chemical manufacturing company, announced that it would invest 10 billion euros in China over the next 6 years. Through this investment, BASF plans to shift 70% of its chemical production to China by 2030, making it easier to supply high-quality chemical products to countries in the South China Sea region and even South Asian countries. As of today, BASF already has 30 chemical production plants in China. These are not just any chemicals. They include the ammonia used to produce fertilizers that farmers use in their fields to grow food like rice, bread, and fruits. Germany is also shifting its second-largest industry, the auto manufacturing industry, to China. Volkswagen, the world's leading car manufacturing company, which already has 40 factories in China, is set to invest $1 billion in China in 2023. This investment is aimed at producing electric cars. Similarly, Mercedes and BMW are also signing partnership deals with the Chinese government, which are crucial for these three companies because 35% of their cars are sold in China. On one hand, the U.S. is trying to put economic pressure on China by banning TikTok, Huawei, and other Chinese companies, while on the other hand, major European companies are investing their money in China. Similarly, in November 2022, a major study was conducted in the UK, France, and Germany to understand what young people think about the US and China. Surprisingly, the majority of European youngsters view the US as a self-interested country that acts as the world's policeman. According to most Europeans, the US does not consider its friends when making decisions and only looks after its own interests. Participants cited examples of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, where the U.S. attacked despite opposition from France, the UK, and Germany. Similarly, leaving Iraq and Afghanistan in such a poor state without any plan is another example of this behavior. Many European youngsters accept the reality that China is now an economic superpower, and that Europe should maintain good relations with it. All these things point to the fact that Europe now wants to break free from American influence, and the French president has openly stated this many times. Just as Europe had to bear the brunt of destruction in the world wars, while the U.S. remained unscathed, Europe is once again suffering the most in the Russia-Ukraine war and the China-Taiwan conflict. It seems that European think tanks have now realized that they need to formulate their own independent foreign policy. The French president has openly said that the time has come for Europe to break free from America's dictation, and the actions of European countries already indicate that they are now looking towards China. This is very natural because if you combine China and India, it becomes the world's largest market, and in my opinion, the future belongs to Asia. Even now, if you combine the populations of India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and China, they make up 50% of the world's population, meaning half of the world lives within this circle. With such a large workforce and low labor costs, Asia is surely going to become the hottest destination for business. Times are changing, circumstances are changing, and it's important that actions are taken timely. Given the developments in world affairs over the past few months, one thing is visible. The global geopolitical system is about to change, and new superpowers are emerging, whether it's China, Russia, or someone else. But one thing I am pretty sure of is that America's position as a superpower is now being challenged, and it's only a matter of time before another country or bloc takes its place. If you liked today's video, be sure to like it and subscribe to the channel.